Welcome back, folks. Oil is on the rebound, but why? Does Britain have any alternative than to exit the EU? Meanwhile, Europeans are pushing for a cashless society, so much for freedom and liberty. Maury, let's start with that first. It seems that there's a push to try and push everything digital. We know that the governments want to be able to have a handle on pretty much everything that goes on in the world.
Oh, absolutely.
Cashless society really takes a limit to our freedoms and our liberties. Do you agree?
There's not going to be any cashless society.
You don't think that Europe is moving towards forcing people onto a digital,
I think
100%
Europe
digital?
is in a state of total anarchy today. And let me broaden that statement a little bit. Helmut Kohl, who was the father of the common market of Europe back in 1999, again, part of that was to show that Germany was now a civilized country, and that they were going to pattern this after the United States of America. Now, this was so naive. They were going to take the 20, well, at that time, I don't think it was 28, it was like 21 or 22 countries. They were going to be like the United States. Well, the United States, we don't have separate countries. Our states are part
where you have different languages, different cultures, different currencies, different everything.
No, but the point was that the United States of America is basically American. And the states have certain rights, but still we're a unified country. In Europe, every little country is against every other little country. There isn't, listen, from my experience, you know what I was taught in the 5 years that I was taught in Germany? How to hate. There were different degrees of hate. You hated the communists, you hated the French, and you hated the
British.
The British, you disdained them because they were snot-nosed elitists. You know what I mean? My God, a Romanian was a criminal. Actually, the term Romania comes from the fact that the Rome Empire used to take their victims and their criminals and dump them in this place called Romania. It's like Botany Bay is in Australia. So each country, the Germans considered themselves superior to every other country in the world. So what you've had in Europe, you haven't had much of a change. They still don't, listen, the Czech Republic doesn't like Slovakia, Slovenia, Slavonia, whatever you got. They all have their own little hatreds, they're all little distances, and they don't get along. I don't care what you can tell me about them. They do what they have to do, but little civil wars, you know, you go back just in the last 20, 30 years between the Serbs and the Croatians, thousands and thousands of people were killed.
And they've erased all their borders too, which is kind of.
They supposedly they're the one thing.
You can walk from one country into another country.
I think the one advantage is labor. I mean, you're right. I mean, if a Polish laborer who didn't have a job could go to Ireland and get a job there, for instance, that is true. But the point is, they haven't changed. That is one of the reasons, And you know that 50% of all the money that's spent on social welfare is being spent by the European community.
And that's going to continue to rise with the invasion that we're watching.
And that because what you've got now is God forbid this would happen, if Sanders became what Sanders is joking about. You know, you and I can joke about Sanders because you know it'll never happen. The guy has no chance. But you got Sanders.
But he has a large percentage of people that believe this, follow this, and swear to it.
That's exactly my point, because it's happening in Europe. Do you know they had riots on the streets of Paris because they were going to do something about lengthening the 35-hour week, I think, to 36 hours, or some minor thing like that. They finally had to pull it back because the people wouldn't stand. Once you give away something,
you can't take it back.
It's not, no matter how minor it might be.
Yeah. Speaking of Europe, Britain is planning to exit the European Union. How realistic is that?
That's very realistic. I think it'd be the smartest thing they could ever do because, first of all, they never got into the Eurozone. The biggest thing of the European community are the 18 nations that are part of the Eurozone.
The currency.
That's the currency, the euro. The British were smart never to give away the pound, because the pound, with the dollar and the yen, were the money that was used for all world transactions.
So then what allegiances do they have to the EU if they don't share the same bond in a currency?
Well, you still have the open
markets?
borders. You have, you're right. I mean, the biggest thing is the Eurozone. It's the money part, but it's the idea of having open borders, and you can have people coming in, going out.
And this president plans on making a trip to Britain to try and discourage them from leaving the European Union. Why does he have to get involved with everything anyways?
I'm surprised you asked that question.
It's rhetorical.
It's a totally rhetorical question. He will do anything at all to gain some attention, especially as he's going out the door.
Just to get involved, just to put his nose in it.
Yeah, why do you think he's pushing the Cuba thing right or not? He makes a big deal about, the last president, the only president ever to go to Cuba was Calvin Coolidge in 1928. That's last year in office, and he went on a battleship, and it took him 3 days. And Obama bragged today that it took him only 3 hours by plane. And by the way, did you know that Raul Castro
snubbed him at the airport?
He was not only snubbing Obama, he was snubbing the United States, because you never hear, when a little country like Cuba would embrace the fact that the world's supposed leader comes in, and they make a big deal of it. He didn't even bother meeting him at the airport.
And I found it very telling, the picture that we showed that has President Obama with his dignitaries, with the huge mural of Che Guevara in the background. I thought that was very telling.
Yeah, well, Che Guevara was, I call him an itinerant communist. He wasn't good enough to just lead a communist movement in Cuba. He did it in Bolivia. He did it in Ecuador. I think he finally.
And I think a lot of these people that are around today, they look at him as an icon because they really don't know what he did or what he stood for. They're clueless. They just buy the T-shirt because they think they're cool.
Well, because he's been everywhere, starting revolutions.
Yeah. Oil is on the rebound. You say it's going to $60 by the middle of the year.
Yeah, I'll tell you why. Because again.
Now let me just jump in for a second.
Yep.
There are reports that Saudi Arabia has been colluding to try and get the oil price down because they're countering Russia and Iran. So now you're going to say that they're going to allow the price to go back up to save their own neck?
I'm yes. What you and I have been talking about a few months ago was the fact that there were two dates. One was November 24th, 2014, when oil was about $75 to $80 a barrel. Nobody expected it to go down. And at a meeting of OPEC at that time, the Saudis announced they are going to even increase their production because they're protecting and increasing their markets, and blamed the United States and fracking as the means of destroying the balance. Well, at that, the market started going down. It kept going down. It bounced back a little bit. And on December 4th, 2015, just a couple months ago, it had gone back up to the high 40s. And everybody expected this time for sure now they're going to work something out. And the Saudis double-crossed even their OPEC partners and said, no, we lost $150 billion in the last year in our budget, but we can afford it because we still have $1 trillion in backlog of money that we have. And we are not going to do anything to allow the United States or Russia or anybody to get back into the game. Well, the interesting thing was then the price went down to $25 in December. Now it's back up to as we speak, to the 40s. And the reason for that, again, I can only judge by the people that I have contact with, who've been right most of the time. Not all the time, but most of the time. And this time, and it's not even that big a secret anymore, the Saudis and the Russians are talking very seriously. And the Russians are saying, look, we now control Iran, we control Iraq, we control Lebanon.
This is a very dicey game that's going on.
Well,
right now.
let me explain to you. And consequently, we are not going to interfere with any activities against you, Mr. Saudi Arabia, if you don't stop this idea of forcing the prices down. We cannot. This is the Lavrov, who is a foreign minister of the Soviet, not the Soviet Union, of Russia, talking to the guy who was here, this guy, Ali Amani, and who said, the United States, get out of fracking because otherwise we'll just get the price down to 20. Well, that was bad enough, and nobody was arguing with him here. But the big point is that the Russians cannot survive as a nation economically. The prices that exist, even at $40.
But if you're Saudi Arabia, you look at it like your lifeblood. The only thing that you have,
that's right,
is oil
and natural
gas. But then
gas.
the other side is that your arch enemy is Iran, and basically their main commodity is oil. So you're kind of in a tough situation.
There's a broader situation now. I think that, here's the bottom line. The bottom line is the Saudis now know that America has become so disenchanted and disattached to foreign policy that if they are invaded, like they would have been by...
If Saudi Arabia is invaded.
Yeah, Saddam Hussein was ready.
Uncle Sam will be nowhere to be found.
Yeah, you got it. It's been proven in Syria, it's been proven in Iran, it's been proven everywhere. Now they know they're by themselves, and they know they'd be overrun in 2 weeks. So now they're talking to Russia. One of the reasons that Putin brought some troops out just to show goodwill, but they definitely are talking now. And there's going to be an informal meeting where Russia has been invited to be a partner. Now that tells me they are going to work something out.